I want to bring in Diana Furchtgott-Roth. She's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. I actually have Mao's little red book here to get into how Mao also believed in disintegrating elements to bring about a whole brand new society. Should this frighten people that he's actually talking about the Cloward-Piven strategy, which is to overwhelm the system, allow the recipient class to recognize its strength, a revolution and supremacy of the proletariat?
It should really frighten people, and he's done it with Obamacare. I mean, what it does is it redistributes from young, healthy people to older people, so younger people have to pay more for their health insurance, to subsidize older people who have already most of the assets and most of the wealth, and they're employed. Younger people should be really angry about this.
What happens in this strategy of theirs when 50.1% of the population has the voting power and a demand on the minority economically?
Well, fortunately, people who don't pay taxes are still moving around in the system. There's still a lot of economic mobility, so a student might not pay taxes this year, and then next year he would pay taxes, or an older person might retire next year after having worked. So already the group of people, the 50% who are not paying taxes, and the bottom 50% already pay only 3% of the individual income taxes. Already that group is kind of in flux. But what's really dangerous is when you make people basically accustomed to entitlements. Like in Europe, they have free health care, except it's not very good. And when anyone gets really sick, if they can, they come here. They have free universities, but they're not that good. So anyone who can comes to universities here. And it gets them used to that dependency mentality.
But why do we want to accept a system that has an equal access to nothing? I mean, that's the Cuban healthcare system or the Cuban economic system. Everybody has a job and nobody has any money of their own. But yet they keep pushing this as this utopia is going to work out when we do it.
Well, what's really interesting is people who live in those systems, where do they want to come? They want to come here to the United States. Like my parents came here to the United States. They didn't really want that free health care. They didn't want all those freebies. They wanted opportunity. They wanted jobs. So they came here.
Now, what about, and I've heard Frances Fox Piven talk about social unrest as a positive. She has talked about bringing down the system, social unrest in the streets. But what's funny is, and Marx writes about this in the Communist Manifesto, he calls them the bourgeois socialists. They want all these disintegrating elements. They just don't want it to affect them. Do some of these NYU professors think that their townhomes surrounding Washington Square Park and other university communities like it, when there's all this social unrest and they're burning things down, they're going to be spared?
They probably do think they're going to be spared, and they're in favor of this. You see urban elites in favor of these redistributive programs, in favor of the new health care plan. You see the elites in Washington, New York, San Francisco, even though they're not part of the bottom 50%. They're the top 50% or the top 5%, and they're still in favor of it. But then they're going to see less good education. They're going to see less good health care. They're going to see the quality of these services deteriorate. Because when private companies provide them, they have to compete. They have to compete against all these other private companies. And so the quality for everybody goes up. That's why Rahm Emanuel sends his kids in Chicago to private school.
That's one of the things I don't understand, or I should say I do understand, is that I always say on my radio program and even on the television program that socialism is for the people, not the socialist. How come none of these people are willing to line up and live by the standards they want to set for everyone else? The first thing Nancy Pelosi and the unions did was opt out of Obamacare.
Right.
As you said, they don't send their own kids to the private schools. I mean, they don't want to ride public transportation, but that's for us.
Exactly. They put all these regulations, and then Department of Transportation officials show up in limousines, and they say, buses and buses are for everybody else, not for them. And what's interesting is President Obama closed down the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program. He tried to do it. Speaker John Boehner stood up for it. That's why it's still there. And his children go to Sidwell Friends.
The president's?
Yes,
because it seems like all the well-to-do muckety-mucks in Washington.
The president's children go to Sidwell Friends, but he doesn't want other people to have that opportunity, even though these schools are not what they should be. I think everybody should have the amount of tax money that the state spends on their child's education, and then the money should follow the child, whether it's to a public or private school.
Wouldn't that be equal protection under the law? If you're going to allocate the spending, and then you tie the school funding to the child, and the children's parents can send them to any school of their choice or whatever one they qualify for, nobody's getting more, nobody's getting less. Isn't that everybody being equal?
Well, it makes sense, and that's what we do with food stamps. We give people a debit card. We tell them they can go to whatever grocery store they like. We don't make them go to the grocery store in their neighborhood. They might say, well, it doesn't have enough fruit and vegetables, or it has poor food. Imagine the headlines if we made low-income people go to the grocery store in their neighborhood with their food stamps. But that's exactly what we do with the schools. We make people go to the school in their neighborhood. Instead, we should give out school stamps, the amount the state spends on the education, and say you go to whatever school you like, public or private.
No, the only problem with that is whenever you ask them how much funding they need, they never give you an exact answer.